People have said that StateAdapt and Zustand are pretty similar. Zustand is a state management library, mostly used in React, and Zustand means state in German. So at first I was not really convinced that they were similar, but if you actually look at some Zustand syntax, it's kind of similar. I can see it kind of has this sprawling object that StateAdapt also has. State adapters are very similar to this. Not so much if you use join stores, but still, I get why people get that impression. Now they're actually totally different in terms of adoption. Here is npm downloads. Zustand is the red one. And for comparison, the main state management library in Angular is the blue one, NGRX store. Zustand is way more popular than NGRX. And so if we just get rid of that for a second, we'll see that's NGRX compared to RX Angular and StateAdapt. And if we get rid of NGRX, then you can see RX Angular. And if we get rid of that, you can see StateAdapt. Very small compared to the others. So it's a pretty popular state management library, and you could compare it to other things like, let's try Redux Toolkit. All right, now blue is Redux Toolkit and orange is Zustand. And you can see here, it's not even as popular as Redux Toolkit, but that's a pretty big deal if it can pass it. It looks like it's going to. So it's extremely popular. And because I'm curious, the same guy made Jotai, which is state in Japanese. And Zustand is way more popular than that as well. Yeah, okay. But there must be something I'm not getting about Zustand, because it says that it uses simplified Flux principles. But you know what? There's one principle that matters more than anything else in Flux. And that's the role that stores play. That they are controlling themselves and not controlled externally. You do see that the logic for how state changes is defined inside the store, which is great. But I don't see any way that the stores themselves can react to independent actions. This is the basic idea. A controller or method, as in MVC controller, you have a callback function or event handler that commands multiple states how to change, or that they should change. And unidirectional or Flux, the idea is you have an event and then the store itself listens to that. The decision to react to that event, that is contained in the store itself. And the reason that matters is because it's declarative. So it's nice when the logic is co-located in the store, but it's nicer when the control logic is also in the store. And that's like the actual command when something should change. And I don't see that with Zustand. I don't see anywhere where actions are shared. They have a Redux integration down here where it's like, where they're defining this dispatch thing and they have like type, and it looks like Redux, but the shape of it is wrong. Like it's not like the point is missed. Like the point of Redux and Flux is that an action doesn't belong to a reducer. It is a standalone thing. But here we are getting the action from a store. So this totally misses the point of Redux. So that's my take on that. Which means what I expect to see, and somebody could maybe prove me wrong, but I found a couple of projects and I converted them to StateAdapt. And if I were to continue and do more and more projects in Zustand, I think what I would see is it scales pretty well until, like I would say, medium applications. And beyond that, it doesn't scale very well. It is just like MVC beyond that point. However, it is a pretty neat solution. It's got there's something about that I really like. When I first saw it, I liked how it looked. But I'm going to compare it. Bundle size, I assume it's going to be a little smaller than StateAdapt. I haven't really focused on that in StateAdapt, but StateAdapt is still, it should be less than 10 kilobytes. I think that Zustand should win in that area, but when it comes to lines of code, we'll see. And when it comes to reactivity, StateAdapt will be more reactive and it will scale better. So that's what I think. Let's look at some projects. All right, here's a FIFA app I found. You first add a home team and an away team, and you can regenerate them. There's some settings where you can toggle between light and dark. And that's about it. Pretty simple. So we'll start with a simple one. We'll do a more complicated one next. And first, here is a commit. I just replace the Zustand library with StateAdapt libraries, and that includes core, RxJS, and React. And so I also added RxJS. So that, and then I provided it and created the specific value to provide to the context. Anyway, so that's just basic setup stuff. I'm just going to commit that and get that out of the way and then compare the actual code. Okay, rather than look at a git diff, let's start by just looking at the original code here on GitHub. So it defines initial state in interface, and it's going to be state and state change functions all in the same interface. It's a unique thing to Zustand. Then we have a utility function. And then we have the actual implementation, the store, takes in that state and implements these functions. And one thing I noticed is that these aren't pure functions. I don't know, maybe it's not, maybe it doesn't matter, but these are technically not like kosher with Redux. So anyway, a lot of, I think people who know StateAdapt are going to see what's going to happen with this. Anyway, so yeah, to me this feels a little boilerplatey, but let's look at the diff now, because that's really all there is right there. So, okay, let's look at the diff. All right, so first of all, you define in StateAdapt just the actual state, like most state management libraries. And then here's the initial state. You don't put that in the store. You don't need to. And let's see. And then you create a thing called an adapter that handles the state change logic. And then you use that adapter and initial state in a store. Okay. So join adapters, basically what it does is for each property of state that you pass in, you define a way that substate can be managed. So for each of these, this is an iTeam, and so you create an adapter for that, and it's going to have team home is going to have its own set random function. And I call it set random instead of just set. I think here they call it set team home and set team away. This is going to become set team home random when it's generated by join adapters. And the reason is because it also sets it also creates a set function. So I didn't want to, create something that's already going to exist. So, and that's just for setting the actual value itself. No logic. Just here's the home team. That would be the set function. So I needed a different one. I called it set random. Okay. But other than that, I didn't really change the structure of any of this. The logic is still inside these functions instead of, and like the like action maybe, that is another place you could put it. But anyway, and then I have a thing called a Boolean adapter, and like, haven't you ever gotten tired of writing toggle functions or whatever, like just basic logic for Booleans? So the thing about adapters, and this is why StateAdapt is called StateAdapt, because these are state adapters, is you can reuse these state change, like the state change logic in these containers called adapters. So this is going to include, it's going to generate some functions. It's going to be, you can see here, set true, set false, and toggle. So those are things that every Boolean could do. So I go ahead and use a Boolean adapter. And then I have a string adapter as well, but it has a bunch of stuff on it that you probably don't need. So I just created a basic string adapter. It doesn't need to be anything. It just needs to get the set function that comes in every adapter. So with that, so all this code isn't necessary anymore. So it went from 68 to 53 lines of code and does the same thing. So yeah, there you go. Okay, now let's look at how it's used in the components. It'll be the same everywhere pretty much. So so instead of use store, which is a thing from, where is this coming from? Where is this coming from? I am confused. Hang on. Oh, that installation commit accidentally deleted a line, but this was basically use store, and it was coming from the store file. So if we go back to store, we'll see it's exporting use store. Yeah. So now I exported so I defined the store here. I just called it settings. Could have called it settings store. But then I have a function called use store from StateAdapt React. And so this is a custom hook here. And you basically filter to the property of state that you want to cause a re-render in the component you're using this in, and then grab the property of the overall state object returned. So, and I call this use theme, and so it's used everywhere. I could have just defined, I could have just used, called this in each of these functions, but I think this made sense. And this is a fine API as well. But here's another component you can see. This is where a bit of code was erased, but basically, let's see, just from the reading side. So this is similar. On here, I did actually use the full use store and pass in settings, and then just grab all the state. But yeah, and then there's a difference here with Zustand, since the state changes are with the state itself. You also call use store for that, and you're selecting. Yeah, here they're selecting specific state. Oh, right here. This is where they're grabbing state from the library. Join adapters automatically create selectors like this for each section of state, each substate. But here's the interesting thing. There in Zustand, you're accessing these set functions from the store itself as well. And here I didn't do that. in StateAdapt because you just call it on the store itself. So settings dot set home team loading. Yeah. Oh, you know what? I could have changed these as well, but it doesn't matter. I could have changed. There's also a state change function called that, and then you don't have to pass in anything. But you know, whatever. It kind of doesn't make a difference, but it's there if you like that. Okay. So, yeah. Okay. Let's look at the next one. And yeah, this is kind of the same, and all the rest of them, they all use the theme. Yeah. Okay. So let's look at the total lines of code that is different between these two things. Okay, here are the results. 70 insertions, 92 deletions. So, yeah, StateAdapt is quite a bit smaller in this small app. I personally think the store file is the most interesting place where it was different, and that went from 68 to 53 lines of code. So that's about, actually I just did a calculator thing, and it's 22% less code. So yeah, that compares, I think, pretty similar, like how RX Angular and StateAdapt compare. NGRX tends to be like 40, and Redux Toolkit was around, yeah, probably around 30 or 40% more code than StateAdapt. So, okay, all right. So not as big of a difference as between StateAdapt and those other ones, but still, okay. All right, now let's do the next project. Okay, this one is a kind of admin app. It really has a lot of features. We've got settings, can do all kinds of layout things, a bunch of different like scaffold pages. But yeah, pretty interesting. And there were 3 stores that I had to convert. Okay, and again, let's start with the previous Zustand implementation. And first, what we have here is a simple, this is more like a demo, but it's like just a counter. So the store type is gonna have just a count and actions, increment and decrement. And then here are the implementations. Very simple. Passes in set, call set. Yeah. There's a bit of boilerplate here. I wonder what the implementation of the library actually looks like. It's probably pretty small, but for an actual library you're going to install from npm, I prefer having the library have more source code in it to prevent me from having to write this over and over and over and over again. Anyway, so here they take a different approach in this repo. They have a use count hook that uses the store. And then they have actions as a separate thing. So they, return actions. So I kind of like that. If you're going to use Zustand, I kind of like this pattern. So, okay, let's look at StateAdapt. Right, so it is just an adapter. Yeah, let's look at this without the diff. There we go. Initial state, state changes. You can do count dot increment, decrement, reset, set, and grab an observable of the state. Yeah. Okay, so that's pretty great. I like that. So that went from 22 lines to 7. 21 to 7. 21 to 6. Yeah, let's say 21 to 6. So it's 1/3 the code. And if you ignore imports, the actual code here is 4 lines. Here it's like 19 lines ish. So yeah, I don't like boilerplate. It drives me crazy. Next, let's look at the settings store 2 out of 3, and it looks like just have some 4 state properties here, and you can set settings and clear settings, and there's some side effects going on here. Right, so here's the initial state, and I don't know why they didn't do that top level. It's a little interesting they did it that way. Regardless, the actions actually, first they're setting state here, and then they're setting local storage. So I changed this a little bit in StateAdapt. So let's look at how I did it there. So yeah, I have zoom in a bit more. Oops. Yeah, that'll be fine. This will work. Yeah, so yep, state and initial state, like always. That's how I always do it. And here's how I chose to do the side effects. This is, I think a pretty standard way, I think now, of doing side effects. Usually you can talk to the store directly to make a state change, but here because there's a side effect, I didn't want to do that inside the state change function itself. I already had a set function, and I had a reset function. And by the way, this was like in the previous store, this was just removing from local storage. I didn't understand why it wasn't removing from state as well. That didn't make sense to me. So I went ahead and did reset instead of noop. But anyway, as part of this source, as it's fed into the store, it involves doing this side effect. So that's where I did that there. The ArcsJS stuff, that's where side effects can happen. And the adapter stuff, that's where the state change logic is. So I like that separation. Okay. And this may not be necessary, but it doesn't hurt. And the reason is because StateAdapt does not actually manage state until something is listening to it. This allows automatic cleanup, which is really convenient. So if something isn't using state anymore, it kind of just goes away. Right. So, but I didn't really know. I could probably test this. I could delete this and see what happens in the app, but I don't care. It doesn't hurt anything. It's not gonna run over and over again. This is a shared file. So I just went ahead and subscribed. I wouldn't recommend like logging it to the console. That's not necessary. But at least subscribing, it sort of holds the state in place. That's just how StateAdapt works. So yeah, okay. And so I wanted to keep the exact same API that Zustand was using. So I went ahead and exported the same function. And if you look, like very few files actually have to change. It's used in like 13 components, but I didn't have to change them. It exports the same thing. Actually, there were some changes, and that's because most components are reading from settings. I didn't change those, but these state change sources, these events, basically, you import those directly, and instead of grabbing the actions from the Zustand store, you call these directly. Where is it? Oh, way down here. Yeah, you just import the state change, like the event source, and you next onto it. And then the store itself determines for itself, like the code is right here where it says, okay, I'm interested in this event source. That's how this store is changing over time. So I really like that. Originally, StateAdapt, you could only change state this way, this indirect way, by not from the event side directly telling the state to change, but just saying an event happened, and then it was declarative inside the stores where it said, okay, this is what causes this to change over time. So all of it is in one place with that way of doing it. But I added the ability to directly command the store to change, because there's not much difference between commanding an event source to change, to emit something new, versus just thinking of the store as an event source itself. All right, so that's that file. So that I'll look at all the lines of code at the end. But that brings us to the last one. The user store is a little more complicated than the others, sort of. It only has two pieces of state, but it has 3 actions, so that's kind of interesting. So it's again doing side effects with local storage. So you can tell how I'm going to be doing that with StateAdapt. It exports more stuff. But then here's like this async function. It's not an async function, but it does, oh, here it is. It handles side effects like network requests and stuff. And normally I would want to convert this over to a more reactive data flow, but there's a lot going on here. And there's like this extra UI concern. It's just going to be a mess to disentangle. And so I decided to just fix one thing. And that is, instead of making this, React developers really should go and watch that Flux React talk again, because this is what they're talking about when they talk about MVC. Multiple state changes being commanded from a single function. This is a controller. It is controlling an entire process. This is no different from what came before React. It's just what happens after StateAdapt set that's different in React. So this doesn't scale. This pattern, this is spaghetti code. The MVC with all the lines going everywhere, this is that. So luckily, most people don't develop apps that are as complex as chat applications, but this doesn't scale if you needed to add that kind of feature. So yeah, and the thing is, these are part of the same store. So these could have been the same action, even with Jotai, Jotai or Zustand. So this shouldn't have been coded like this, even with Zustand, I don't think. But yeah, I haven't seen the ability with Zustand to either react to observable data sources or have an event as a standalone thing that multiple stores can react to. So anyway, so I didn't really touch this much except making this a single state change. Let's look at how I did that in StateAdapt. So same kind of changes as before, just defining state. Where did it become inline? That's interesting. What did I do? Well, they're different enough anyway that I kind of just want to show. Yeah, you got kind of the same differences as before. State, initial state, sources, and then here the syntax is a little more verbose with StateAdapt, because these side effects are now setting multiple states, because I changed this down here. Now instead of two state changes, this is an event. You signed in, that was successful. I should have called this sign in success. Anyway, so yeah, I decided to have this an event, and since it has two events, this is going to be a full callback function. This kind of should have just been one key in local storage, I think, but it doesn't matter. I just kept it the same. So when the user signs in, set both of these. When the user gets reset, remove both. So yeah, and other than that, pretty much the same as before. Okay, so yeah, kind of basic. You can kind of see how things are different. The only really interesting thing in this comparison is the sources and using events, but also the join adapters thing you saw in the other repo, or maybe it was earlier in this one. That was the other repo. Just there's more utility stuff for creating state change logic, I think, in StateAdapt. But anyway, okay, so let's look at some components. Same thing, got the event that you're importing instead of using it from the store. And yeah, just a bunch of this. Yep, just a bunch of that. Okay, now let's do an overview of lines of code on this one. Okay, it looks like we had 64 insertions, 90 deletions. I think that's pretty similar percentage change. Maybe it's a little more. Yeah, it's a 29% change. so 29% less code. You only need 64 lines to do what they were doing with 90 lines. So that's pretty fun. Yeah, so overall, what do I think? Well, I think React is crazy. React has so many state management libraries. It's insane. So many. And it's good. It's good to have a lot of options. And this one is unique. This one is more unique than most that I've seen. Like, I found a repo that showed like 50 state management libraries for React, and half of them were just slightly different from each other. Just slightly different. And like I don't know why people want to create state management libraries. I created one. I can tell you why I created one, but I don't get, like, it's not fun really, for me at least. It's not that fun for me because managing all this and getting all this right, and like, previous documentation version, like I just put this up, trying to figure out how to get people to use it, implementing all these different things and React, Angular. Yeah, it's a lot of work. This isn't fun. I hate managing stuff like this, but it's so important to me that I want to see cleaner code out there. I think a lot of people create these libraries because they're like bored or something. They have something, an idea they have that's slightly different, and they're like, hey, I think I want to try this and see if maybe it can be a popular project. And they're kind of maybe trying to boost their career or something. I kind of reluctantly created StateAdapt because I didn't see anything even close to it. I wanted something that would incrementally adapt with the complexity of the problems you're solving. So it would start really simple and small, basically as simple as it could be. Let's do React, since this is a React video. I want it to be super simple at the basic level, but then when it came to the most complex examples, I wanted it to be fully reactive and as easy as possible for that kind of situation, where you can reuse state logic between multiple instances of state, where you can react and declare how a state evolves over time all in one place, and do sort of shared derived state. That's kind of a necessary thing, but in a way that's efficient. Like ArcGIS isn't great for that, so you actually need selectors. So I created selectors, uses like proxy object. But anyway, so yeah, I needed this. I wanted this. That's why I made this. So anyway, hope you found this video interesting. I think state management is a fun topic. Personally, it's very fun. So I'm going to do another one of these. Maybe I'll do Jotai next. Who knows? But yeah, hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think. And if you have any questions, thanks.